Hello, welcome back to the MichaelSisco show. We have a very special episode today, a special guest, Ann Wilson Smith, author of Charlottesville Untold, Inside Unite the Right. At first, I want to just thank you, Ann, for one, coming on the show, and for two, just writing the book, because I think you bring a very objective and honest perspective, and that takes a lot of courage, especially given the subject. So I just want to thank you for that. And while I have to set up my entropy chat because I don't have a producer. But could you just quickly introduce yourself to the viewers and just kind of explain what inspired you to write this book?
I'm, as you said, Ann Wilson Smith. I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, and my connections. I have some family connections to the Southern Heritage movement, and my father is pretty well known as a history professor who's writes a lot about the South, Clyde Wilson, and has a publishing company that he founded in his retirement that published the book, Shotwell Publishing. And coming from that background, I've been very aware of Southern cultural heritage and the I guess the movement to remove it, and so that's why I had an interest in this event.
Okay, awesome. Give me 1 second. All right. Okay, great. And so feel free to get into all the details that you want. There's this is on YouTube, but it's also on Odyssey, so don't feel like there's any as long as we're not talking about a certain medical issue or so-called vaccine, we were good.
Okay. Yeah, I can handle that.
Okay, Alice in the chat says, such an important book, very well written. It's a good homeschool book to have in your library to teach your children real history. So
cool. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me.
So what exactly, why don't we just start with, what was the purpose of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, and who organized it?
Well, the purpose was simply it was permitted as a free speech speech rally in support of monuments, and that
I think I lost you for about 20 seconds.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, it was supposed to be a free speech rally for the Robert E. Lee Monument, and as I said, there have been a lot of Confederate monument removals in the previous months leading up to that, and so that was the main purpose of the rally. Although, as Jason Kessler and Charlottesville native was the organizer of it, and it was meant to bring together a lot of different groups. There was in the early Trump era, there were a lot of new emergent personalities and groups on the right wing in politics, and it was meant to bring a vast array of these people together for the purpose of preserving the monument and just standing up for for history. And so it was just supposed to be that a massive demonstration.
Okay, and so I know it's been mostly characterized as a neo-Nazi, white supremacist rally. Is there any truth to that, or?
Well, that was a contingent there. That's true. There was also a lot of Southern Heritage supporters. There was some. It was a vast array of different types of groups represented there.
Okay. Well, but obviously, I mean, of the speakers, did any of them identify as such? Of any of the the book speakers?
Yeah, I think the Traditionalist Workers Party had a speaker there.
Heimbach.
Yeah, Heimbach, and and Cantwell was there. Richard Spencer. Augustus Sol Invictus was supposed to speak. Michael Hill, the League of the South, was supposed to speak. There were about a dozen people listed on the bill.
Okay. Yeah. So what ended up happening? I know it was supposed to be people were basically thought that they were coming to hear people talk and to hear speeches.
Right.
What
that is what the attendees expected. And I know, speaking for myself, that I had been aware that the organizers had been working proactively with the authorities there. So that's why I felt like it was going to be under control and safe, because I knew that they had been working with the authorities. What happened was basically the left-wing militants were allowed to run wild. The police were very, very passive. The rally attendees were funneled into a park, surrounded on most of the way by these by counter protesters. Some of them are militant, throwing projectiles with chemical weapons, and before the rally took place, before anybody was ever able to speak, a state of emergency was declared, a dispersal order was given, and the rally attendees were pushed out of the park into the crowd of counter protesters, and with police passively standing by, chaos erupted.
what initiated? Who was? I guess who was the antagonist that I guess was there? Did they have an excuse to call a state of emergency, or was this?
Well, yeah, and this is a really important point that most people don't know. Now, there was a report that was commissioned by the city that a federal prosecutor did, or former federal prosecutor. It was a very thorough report. It was 250 pages long. They interviewed about 150 people. They watched all the video they could from every different source they could, and they did a very thorough report. And they pretty much they lay most of the blame on the authorities, and in particular there was the police chief, and they had a command center at the time, and that the police chief, they had two witnesses say that the police chief said, "Let them fight. It will be easier to declare an unlawful assembly." So in other words, the police chief. That implies that the authorities were wanted to allow the chaos so they could shut down the rally.
Okay. Yeah, I've been in a few rally situations in which we received heavy counter Antifa presence. Mm-hmm. And the police have always, for instance, I was at the Straight Pride Parade in Boston. I actually went to Unite the Right too as a member of the media, and the police completely separated the protesters from the counter protesters, with physical barriers and a police presence. Was there any effort at all to do that?
No, not at all. To the contrary, and the independent report even said there were no officers during the entrance and exit routes where the protesters and counter protesters were close together. Numerous people that I interviewed, I don't normally go to rallies. I've never been anything like this, but I interviewed a lot of people who do this. They belong to groups that go around the country to these sort of things, and they were astounded when they got there. They were, that standard procedure of separating the hostile parties and putting barriers in between was not happening there.
What role, as I know you mentioned in the book that the militias that were neutral kind of in the beginning before the dispersal kind of played that role. Mm-hmm. How were they? What was the extent of their involvement throughout the day?
Well, I think they were there. They showed up. They were one of the first groups to show up, and several people I interviewed said that they were thankful the militia was there, that the militia, separated hostile parties. Even some police officers in the independent report were quoted as saying that the militia guys were doing a good job, that they were neutral, they were breaking up fights, and there was after the dispersal and the chaos that they were actually guarding an alley that was being used as like a triage center, because that they were guarding it from aggressors, where certain people were there were injured people being kept safe.
Yeah. So what exactly? I mean, I know they get pushed into the basically people that wanted to kill them.
Yeah. Literally, yes.
Yeah, and I know that in part of your book, you mentioned where Rebecca points out that most of the right-wing people were armed with firearms, and yet nobody got shot. Which looks like, is an exercise in great restraint.
Yeah.
But obviously, you had the flamethrower guy, the warning shot, and whatnot. And can you just describe the result of that, with no way to get out of the city, and then maybe how that led to what we saw happen with Heather Heyer?
Yeah, absolutely. I had several people comment that, they were trying to get back to their cars, had great difficulty getting back to their cars. They had to fight their way through the crowd, or some of them chose to wander through town to avoid the crowd. They had to go a roundabout way. They were separated from their friends. There was chaos going on, and that the rally attendees had been dispersed. The left-wing protesters were relatively left alone, and they were in groups. They were marching, and at the point when the car crash happened, it was about an hour and a half after the dispersal order and the state of emergency, and there were still hundreds of people in the streets. And at that point, you would think, with all the state and local and police and the National Guard, that they would have been able to clear the streets to abide the dispersal order. There were massive amounts of people. The particular street where the infamous crash happened that killed a woman, there had been one officer there. She was a school resource officer, and she was by herself and radioed in that she felt afraid, and they allowed her to leave her post. They didn't assign anyone else to her post. There was no police officer on that street, which is remarkable, because there were hundreds of officers assigned to this event. So that just shows you what was going on with the authorities at the time. I mean, in my opinion, this should not have happened. The authorities should not have allowed this situation where that ever could have happened.
I know that we can't, neither of us can really, dig into the mind of James Fields, for instance, but there seem to be some mitigating factors that are just completely ignored by the mainstream media.
Yeah, there's a lot of them, and I don't want to say that I am certain that he is innocent. He did have a history of he had a lot of mental health issues, and including temper flare-ups. So I don't really, like as you said, we don't know what was in his mind at the moment. But some facts that a lot of people don't know are the fact that that he had, and this came out in his trial, there was forensic evidence that a moment or two before the crash, he had put his home address into his GPS, and every route that it suggested was blocked. So, and he was in an unfamiliar town, and every route the GPS suggested was blocked. So this wasn't a matter of he was looking for a crowd. I mean, he could not have gone. He didn't know how to get out of town. And another thing a lot of people don't know was that there was a left-wing militia there, Redneck Revolt, and the leader of that militia was had waved a rifle at him just a block or two before he got there. And it's not he bragged about it on social media, so it's not even in dispute. But so that could have contributed to a fearful state of mind for him. So just something that a lot of people don't know.
And what was his name? He's a professor, isn't he?
Dwayne Dixon. He's a UNC, I think. I don't know. I think he's a UNC professor.
Okay. Amazing. I remember hearing all of this stuff, honestly, because I knew people that were there. But, none of it's made the light of day past the internet. Yeah, and what about do we know for certain that Heather Heyer passed away from impact, or?
Well, that is what the medical examiner said. Now, there was some confusion about that because at one point her mother did an interview and said that she had the woman had died of a heart attack, and so a lot of people speculated that she wasn't actually hit by the car, but the medical examiner said that she was.
Yeah, and what was she doing out there?
Well, she was one of the left-wing protesters, and she seemed to be with a group of Black Lives Matter counter-protesters. And they had been walking around after this dispersal order had been called, walking around in the streets. Yeah.
Which, now that was illegal, wasn't it, at that point?
The dispersal order had been called, so. Mm-hmm.
So she was in violation because they were actually kind of having a mini rally in the street, right? It was a gathering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so. At one point there, as I said, because of the dispersal, there were a lot of people from out of town. They were, pushed in random directions out of the park. They maybe didn't know where their cars were, or they couldn't go straight to their car and were walking around. And some of them ended up in a Black neighborhood. And the left-wing protesters have really good communications and intelligence, and they heard that the alt-righters were headed towards to the Black neighborhood and assumed that they were going there to attack the residents, and which and so they started to march because they wanted to protect the residents that they thought were going to be attacked. And so that was happening around that time.
Okay. Yeah. And some of the militia people were attacked as well, and ended up, I think, having what was the guy's name? I know they ended up beating up one of them, and they were charged for it. One of the Black Lives Matter protesters that was attacked had the mag light, hit with the mag light. Who was that guy?
Oh no, that was that was in a militia, but that was at the parking garage fight. You're talking about the DeAndre Harris fight. Mm-hmm. That was a separate incident.
That's it. So maybe we could run through all of the well, not all of them, but what were the legal after effects of what are some of the key cases that stemmed from this?
Well, let me give you one example. I think most people, and you mentioned the warning shot that was fired, that there was a counter protester with a makeshift flamethrower made of a can of hairspray and a lighter, most people have seen the photo of him shooting the flames towards some people on a stairwell. One of them was holding a Confederate flag. That resulted in there was a Klansman there who pulled his gun and fired a warning shot near the feet of the man with the flamethrower. And that the Heaphy Independent Report notes that while this was happening, the man fired the shot, reholstered his weapon, and the police did not react to either the flamethrower or the warning shot. That's how passive they were being that day. And after that incident, the men were arrested. The man who fired the warning shot was sentenced to about 4 years in prison. The man who was shooting the flamethrower into the crowd spent 3 weeks behind bars. That's and that's pretty typical of what happened in the other altercations.
Yeah, I know we got a super chat from Zoltanius HN who says that he was actually in Charlottesville as part of Vanguard America. They had him in a security team watching an entrance. When they said to leave, we tried, but were pushed into Antifa. I was even cut off from my group. Marshall Krieg says James Field drove very slowly until his car was struck by bats by Antifa. Does any of the now there's drone footage that was recently released about all of this, right? Does that offer any kind of clarity on?
Well, it really just is more evidence of what the people that were there have been saying, that they were pushed into a hostile crowd, and they were wildly outnumbered, and had to fight their way through the crowd.
Who bears, I guess, I know that there are several. What are the opinions? I know you want to take kind of a neutral stance. Do you think that any of this was, I guess what's more likely? Was this just gross incompetence, purposeful incompetence, or a plan? Was this all?
People have different opinions about that, and as I mentioned, the police chief said, "Let them fight. It will be easier to declare an unlawful assembly." So that sounds intentional to me. Sounds like a plan. I know that Jason Kessler has been really fighting for a lot of freedom of information requests to get the information about what was going on in the command center at the time, and he's had mixed success with that. But there's a lot that still is really unknown about what was going on among the different authority figures that day. That just isn't known.
Yeah. Okay. It didn't. I mean, the mayor wasn't even allowed in the command center, right?
Right.
That seems kind of weird, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know there's some relevant court cases happening now. Can you kind of give us the breakdown of that?
Right. Well, the big one is a civil suit, and it is going on right now. It's about almost done with the second week of the case, and so it's Sines versus Kessler. And Elizabeth Sines was a law student at the time of the rally, and she was on the street where the car accident occurred. And there are about I guess about half a dozen plaintiffs that are bringing suit for different. Either some of them were physically injured seriously, and others are saying that they were traumatized by the events of the day. And the suit is it's being spearheaded by a woman who Roberta Kaplan, who has argued before the Supreme Court and has a long list of clients with names you would recognize and big companies, and had expected, if Hillary Clinton had won the presidency, to have a role in her administration. So this is, so it's a very powerful, well-respected lawyer and well-connected, and they are bringing this a lawsuit for damages against the planners of Unite the Right, claiming that they had organized a conspiracy to commit racially motivated violence. And they went back to an old act that was used against the Ku Klux Klan to bring this suit. And they're trying to prove there was a conspiracy. And they're in the midst of that trial now. And it has a lot of free speech implications, because if you can be sued for violence that happens at an event, a speaking event, then has a very chilling effect on free speech.
Now, did she not make a comment that she would? Is this the lady that said that she would hunt these people down for the rest of their lives?
Yes.
So, in essence, right-wingers wanted to have a permitted legal rally with no plan to commit violence. I mean, there's no evidence of that anywhere, even in the Discord servers. They just wanted to show up to hear people speak. And this lady, Roberta Kaplan, who I think everybody should know that name, believes that everyone in attendance of that rally should be hunted down and basically forced to expend all of their life savings on legal battles. Is that correct?
She's pretty much said she wants us to have a deterrent effect. And of course, they say on white supremacists, but I mean, you know how loose the definition of white supremacist is nowadays. So, but that is what it's about. And it's being spun, in the mainstream media. This is the taking down the white supremacists, the vast white supremacist network, when it's really, it's a bunch of very wealthy and well-connected people suppressing the speech of a, working class group of people.
Yeah, and what's interesting is there was a real KKK rally like the week before, and so what's an interesting question is why so much vehemence against a considerably more moderate group than against these actual radicals, the KKK group? Why is it because maybe there's more of a threat with these people from the second rally?
I think so, because I think that the rally that, around that time, around the early Trump era, there was a lot of political movement on the new right, a lot of new personalities, new groups forming. There were, a big push for the populist agenda to be discussed, and I think that was really the beginning of what could have been a real movement to push back against the whole leftward march. So I think that is something that they left people would have wanted to stop. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Father John Whiteford says, was Matthew Heimbach a Fed plant?
I can't speculate about who was a federal agent. I don't know. People are always suspicious of everyone else being a federal agent. I don't know.
I think he's just an idiot, honestly. He had, believe it or not, because I'm originally from Maryland in the Baltimore area, and he went to Towson in Baltimore. Archie, yes, that is the real Father John, by the way. So he was there, and he was doing his little like pro-white activism on campus, and I think he obviously went a little more radical later with the National Socialist stuff. Mm-hmm. But he showed up at my parish once before he was known, and he was asking weird questions about how diverse the parish was. And I think it was a little too diverse for him to ever come back. But no, I think he's just an idiot. That's just my take. He's obviously like gone back. He did his weird apology tour.
Yeah, he was seemed to be a former extremist for a while, and now I think he's drifted back. I don't really know.
Yeah, who knows? I think anytime he seemed to what I really had a problem with was his attempts at basically kind of merging orthodoxy with racialism, with this like race worship, basically. And I think that's why he was excommunicated from 2 jurisdictions, and I think he finally ended up in a schismatic old calendars group. I don't know what he's doing now, but there's nothing, obviously you can be right wing and pretty ultra conservative and be orthodox. In fact, I would argue that you can't be anything other than that and be orthodox, in my opinion. Of course, yeah. St. John Kronstadt said that orthodoxy is inherently traditional and conservative. But when you're bringing in like race worship and stuff, that just has no place in orthodoxy. Anyways. I don't know. Are you Orthodox, Ann? I have no idea. No. What's your faith background?
I'm Baptist.
Oh, cool. Okay. Very so SBC or okay, cool. Awesome. So let's see. So in your book you do explain some of the devastating after effects of the rally. Mm-hmm. From your estimation, what would you say was the most devastating effect from Charlottesville?
Well, I would think that the censorship, there was an unprecedented wave of internet censorship in the aftermath. It sort of gave big social media companies the excuse to purge all the the wrong thinkers, because you don't want to encourage some terrible terrorist thing like what just happened in Charlottesville. So there was a lot of censorship, people being deplatformed, kicked off of fundraising services. Some people were kicked off of like Uber and Airbnb, things like that. So that was kind of unprecedented, and there was a big push of that. And I think that the fact that the mainstream conservatives either didn't turn a blind eye to it, or even some even cheered it, that would have been a time for legislation that would have protected people's rights based on ideology to be in the public square that is social media now. And they didn't do that. And what happened a few years later, Donald Trump, while he was president, got pretty much deplatformed and unable to speak to the public because, the social media oligarchs have more power than he does in that way.
Yeah. So do you think this was kind of a turning point in the country as far as free speech goes? I know the ACLU seemed to make a pivot afterwards too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I do. I do think it was a very bad turning point for free speech. That's why lawsuits are so important. Are we still there?
Yeah, I lost you for about 10 seconds.
Yeah, a lot of people see Charlottesville as something in the rear view, and they don't understand that there's legislation ongoing which could still impact them. It could impact anybody that cares about free speech. I know Jason Kessler has sued the city of Charlottesville for violating his First Amendment rights by allowing the heckler's veto by not protecting the permitted rally. And that is that they lost initially, and it's being appealed. Could conceivably go before the Supreme Court, because it's something there's different parts of the country have decided different rules about. But this could affect everybody who cares about free speech, because if dissidents aren't protected, if your local government could just stand down and let a mob beat the tar out of you, then you really don't have free speech in effect. So it's very important.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty big implication. I think we saw it kind of. Do you think Charlottesville could have been a dry run for, let's say, like January 6th?
I've heard a lot of people make that comparison, and I think the template is the same. I think that it's a template that works to be able to, you allow a certain amount of chaos, and then the media will spin it the way that's most convenient for, the powers that be. I think it's a template that they've perfected and continue to use.
Yeah, it seems, I mean, and January 6th was arguably less chaotic than Charlottesville in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. It seemed to be more orderly, to be honest. Of course, you did have the tragic death of Ashley Babbitt, and then a few Capitol police officers who were so depressed that they had to take part, that they killed themselves afterwards, which we were told that they were the wrong story. But yeah, this seems to be, I think people need to start paying a little more attention to these ongoing cases and the implications for the precedent that will be set by them. What do you think we could, I guess, where do we go from here? Where do dissidents go from here? How can they, what can they do? How can they even exist or have a viable movement? Or
I don't know. It's a challenge, and I'm not a political organizer or anything, but it's absolutely a challenge when you can't, the free speech online. You're prohibited from being on mainstream sites, and I know a lot of people are reluctant to attend rallies or public gatherings because they're afraid that they'll be attacked, and they'll either be hurt, or if they defend themselves, they'll be arrested or sued. And I'm not really sure what the solution is. I wish I knew.
I've experienced. Yeah, just as being in politics and being a campaign manager, and now being I can't talk about on my show, but I've been done political events and I get pushback, what about Charlottesville? What about Charlottesville? So, I mean, I've experienced that myself. It's in people's mind. They're afraid to go. They're afraid to go out and do stuff. Which actually, the Stop the Steal stuff actually kind of shocked me that we were able to get 1 million people out there for the first Stop the Steal rally.
Well, I think a lot of people are naive because they think, that Charlottesville, as the media told them, it's just a bunch of, evil Nazis that were attacking people, and they don't see themselves as some, they don't understand that the authorities that allowed this, what the authorities allowed to happen to people who were intending to be peacefully assembling, and they don't think it would apply to them. That's just a bunch of bad, shady characters that were misbehaving, and they don't see that that's a pattern that can be applied to anybody who the ruling class doesn't like.
Yeah. And so what happened to the what happened to the, I guess, the alt-right, so to speak, after Charlottesville? What was the effect?
Well, it's kind of shattered. I mean, several of the people that were supposed to be primary people or speakers in Charlottesville have been imprisoned. A lot of them are struggling financially. It's and it really, as one woman commented, it was a real busting up of camaraderie. There was a lot of finger pointing. There was a lot of, and people blaming each other, didn't trust each other. So it really did. I guess it had the effect that the people that planned it intended, because it did really suppress the movement a lot.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you do have, I don't know. Some people have said that it kind of has a purging effect in a way. Like all of the flamboyant kind of charlatan characters are kind of like ostracized and marginalized in a way that they may or may not deserve to be. And now you do have movements like, you have Nick Fuentes, who's in America First, who has managed to be pretty effective at organizing and rallying successfully. Even though he's on the no-fly list, which I think you even pointed out in your book, maybe? Was that you?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay. But, I mean, Nick Fuentes is on a no-fly list for just being at outside the Capitol, didn't even go in. But he was an attendee at Charlottesville, but he kind of emerged in the clear, so to speak, a little bit. He still gets, one of the things he has to wear in his sleeve is a attendee of the neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville. How do you I don't know, how do you explain to people this? Like it's just, it seems difficult. I mean, I guess we could just tell everybody to read your book, right? But it amazes me that like the normal Trump supporter, for instance, and as much as Trump will yell fake news, that people still just believe that it was a white supremacist neo-Nazi rally, and that anyone that was there is just worthy of being doxxed and can't have a job. And why don't you talk about that? Some of the doxing that occurred, maybe with like Andrew Dodson and whatnot.
Well, there was so much video footage of everything that the left-wing activists had to work with to identify people, and even within a day or two of the rally, they were identifying people. They were, getting people fired from their jobs. And a lot of people have become estranged from their family who found out they were there, or had trouble, keep finding or keeping a job because of it.
Yeah. Why don't you, I know we had a guy named, can you tell the story of Andrew Dodson real quick?
Well, there was one fellow who was in Lee Park, and he was apparently kind of an in the Fed sort of guy, and he was an engineer. I think he was from South Carolina and had studied in Arkansas. Was wearing an Arkansas T-shirt at the Torchlight rally, and somebody identified him as being with the university, or they actually identified somebody at the University of Arkansas and thought they were the rally attendee mistakenly. And so that person wouldn't get harassed. This man, Andrew Dodson, he came forward to say, no, it wasn't, don't harass them. I was the one that was there. And he came forward willingly, and he lost his career, and he was ostracized from society. It's kind of the, like I said, the Alinsky, what he isolate your target, and ostracize them from everyone. And he eventually ended up in March of the next year committing suicide.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
And so he made some comments about like he seemed to be the opposite of a hateful person, honestly.
Yeah, and there's video of this that he actually was in Lee Park and was pepper sprayed in the face, and after he cleaned his eyes, he actually walked over to the person that pepper sprayed him and said, he said, I would rather suffer like this now than have you and your family suffer in the future, because what he said, I love you and I forgive you. He said straight to that person's face, which is just amazing. This is not a bad guy. This is not a hateful guy.
Yeah. Now he actually, like, other people were wrongfully doxxed as him, and he, for their sake, doxed himself.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's an honorable thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sad that he, went out the way he did. But, yeah, that really kind of like was a tearjerker when I was reading your book, because I didn't realize that had happened. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing the pictures of him and thinking his kind of his suit was hilarious, and
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm actually friends. Well, I'm an acquaintance with Millennial Matt, and I guess we could be friends, but I didn't realize that he was close to him, so might have to reach out to him and see if we could chat about that. But yeah, he seemed like he was, but not everyone there was there. Sure, you had a small minority of wackos, like
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Self-identifying Nazis and stuff, but I think the predominant attendance were people that just wanted to preserve the statue, mm-hmm. and speak out about in defense of our cultural heritage, right? So we do have a caller. I don't know if you want to stick around, Anne, but where can people find your book? It's buy or purchase.
Yes.
Charlottesville Untold.
Well, we're publishing through Shotwell Publishing, and we have I think the best way is to go to shotwellpublishing.com, and you can get the ebook there, or you can click on a book finder link, and it will tell you different places you can buy it. You can look it up on Amazon, or but we're not publishing through them, but you can look it up there if you want to as well.
Okay. Now, do you want to stick around while we take calls? Totally up to you.
I don't know. I think it's. I guess we can do that. Sure.
Okay. All right. Because mm-hmm. I do see we have the famous Kessler has called. So,
hey, good to be with you guys.
Welcome to the MichaelSisco show, Jason Kessler. How are you?
Very good. And I just like to second the plug for Anne's book. Anne just, really did an incredible job with the Charlottesville Untold book. I mean, Anne has only written a few books, but when you read this thing, you will see this is a really impressive piece of scholarship. And I think it does capture a very important element of American history that really has been literally untold. There are different aspects to the Charlottesville rally. There is the fact that, you had the Antifa counter protesters there. You had the people who were there to support Robert E. Lee and the monument. And I would say I was also trying to do a white civil rights kind of thing, very much in the style of other civil rights protests. And then you definitely did have, people who were more far right that tried to make the rally more about their own agenda. And that's part of it too. And that aspect of the Charlottesville rally is really something that I'm okay fighting for as well, because that's where you get into the ACLU and the free speech territory. Even those folks who came there, the Nazi groups that tried to make it about themselves rather than about civil rights or American history or whatever, I mean, even their speech has to be supported. That is protected by the United States Constitution. And Anne's book shows the highest aspirations of the rally and what we were really trying to accomplish. And I think it's very important. And I thank her for writing that book.
Thank you.
Yeah. Could you, I guess, while you're here, why don't you explain that? I remember you. I was I guess a periphery to the to the whole scene back then, and I maybe fortunately didn't attend Charlottesville. I was close to going, but there was a church event that I wanted to go to more, and I kind of, maybe God was looking out for me. But what was it that motivated you, Jason?
It was those things that I was saying, the city of Charlottesville, really, like most of America, supported the Confederate monuments and the monuments to other American historical figures that are under attack now. But you had basically carpetbaggers, people who weren't from Virginia that were coming in and stirring up trouble. Like you had an individual named Wes Bellamy who was trying to make a career for himself by attacking white historical figures like Thomas Jefferson and Robert E. Lee, and it really stirring up divisions that didn't exist in Charlottesville. And it was something that you could see was on the horizon that was going to happen all over the country. And we've really seen that tragically come to a head in 2020 when BLM and Antifa have just, went on this rampage, murdering, maybe 30 some people, tearing down monuments, costing billions of dollars in damages. And the Charlottesville rally happened before people were aware of any of that stuff, what Antifa was. They didn't know how deadly Black Lives Matter could be. And these people just unleashed holy hell on us to shut us down from being able to speak at this rally.
Do you think that maybe the events of the summer of 2020 and, just kind of having our cities burned down by Antifa and BLM, and then, the whole January 6th kind of psyop, do you think this is an opportunity to kind of have people revisit Charlottesville with the new light?
I hope so. I think that it shows that the media was playing dirty tricks in their coverage of Charlottesville. And I think a lot of the folks who became the victims of those dirty tricks in 2020 when they were trying to say, whatever, that Trump supporters or whatever were framing Black Lives Matter and Antifa during those riots, or when they tried to really blame however many Trump supporters in this country, 60-80 million, for the actions of a very small minority on January 6th that may have crossed the line. And we're not even talking about deadly violence, but those who did commit violence, should not be used to frame all the rest. But the left-wing protests are so violent, and they're described as mostly peaceful protests. But with the right wing, what they'll do is they'll look for the tiny minority who say something that is shocking or offensive, and then or engage in something illegal, and they'll try and stigmatize the entire group. And never has that been done to a greater extent than in Charlottesville. I mean, there were so many honest, fine people who just been so mercilessly smeared, and that's the thing that makes me fight and want to correct the record on this historical event.
Yeah. Now you have a court. Your court case is happening now, right? With Sines versus Kessler.
Yes. It's a very long trial. We're just about to wrap up the second of 4 weeks.
Oh wow. Wow. I heard it went well with Richard Spencer today.
Well, I guess that depends on who you are. I think it was kind of a mixed bag, honestly. I think Spencer just did a really awful job in his testimony, and I think he agreed to some things that the plaintiffs were trying to insinuate that he probably didn't even know what he was saying. I can't believe that somebody with his public speaking experience would let those things slide, but he did. On the other hand, he was kind of helped out of a jam a little bit by the fact that the attorney who was examining him was just way out of line and overly aggressive. I was likening it to like he seemed like he was trying to be a character from the movie Inglourious Bastards, torturing like some Hollywood neo-Nazi. He was just like so aggressive, like calm down, man. And it wasn't just my perception that the judge had to reprimand him numerous times. And it was getting pretty serious at certain points where the judge was like, sir, you're not acting professional, and a professional wouldn't say something like this in front of a jury. So I honestly, it was kind of a mixed bag. Yeah.
So maybe you could touch on what are the implications? Why is this important for all of us to care about? What is the implication going forward? I know it's Roberta Kaplan's the one that's Sign's the one that did this one, but
the free speech aspect of this case, the plaintiffs are claiming that it was a conspiracy or whatever, but really it has to do with the nature of free speech in America now. When you talk on any issue of dispute that's going to cause anger or whatever, which is like the most important thing to protect in the First Amendment, you have these anti-speech extremists that want to physically attack people who are going to speak their minds. And it's what do you do in that situation? A lot of people, as you guys were saying earlier, are just going to give up and go away. And these people in Charlottesville, whatever else you want to say about them, they stood their ground, and they were ready to defend themselves when they were attacked by people who had very violent intentions. So it has to do with those two things. The ACLU is giving up the ghost on free speech. It doesn't want to protect right-wing speech anymore. It wants to be just a standard left-wing shill organization. So we are standing and trying to hold that line for a lot of people right now that don't even appreciate it because they don't want to be called racist or whatever. It's too ugly. It's too dirty. But that's why we're here, because we're going to deal with this dirty stuff right now, and we're going to try to do it for everybody. And the second aspect is the self-defense aspect of it, because if you go out there and speak, I don't care how offensive you are, people don't have a right to punch a Nazi. They don't have a right to lay a hand on you. And if they lay a hand on you, you have a right to lay a hand on them back and stop them from hurting you or from hurting other people.
Yeah.
That's not a conspiracy. That's your right.
Yeah. That's true. Looking back on, I guess, reflecting on the rally, is there anything you would have done differently if you look?
There's a lot of things I would have done differently. Just some of these people, like Spencer, for instance, were just so duplicitous. So many of them were good people, but you also had duplicitous people. And I would never, ever deal with those kinds of people again. I would be much more selective with those who I would deal with going forward. Personally, I should have moderated chats better. That's one of the things that they blame me for, is they say, well, you had an online chat where people were too liberal in their language, So if people are talking about self-defense that they're going to have to use to protect themselves at the rally, they need to be very serious about that. It's not a game. You can't be telling stupid jokes and whatever. And so if I was to do another event, I certainly would be much more careful with the internet moderation. I would be more careful with my own language, let's say, and yeah, those are the main things.
Okay. Well, this is interesting. I'm interested to get your answer on this. What do you think the path forward is for, I guess, dissident right-wing activism and politics? And do you think anyone out there is doing a good job with it? I'll throw that out there.
Well, I think this case is going to determine a lot of that. There's just such heavy headwinds against speech right now. I know you've mentioned some of the folks who've emerged since the rally, like Nick Fuentes. He was there, but he's kind of doing his own thing. And I think he's been fairly successful with trying to chart a course forward and fixing a lot of the mistakes that the alt-right was known for. I think that time has borne out the fact that you do have to be more careful with your language. You have to be more respectful to people, things of that nature. But I think even that generation, you know, they are still learning some things, you know, with the January 6th was, you know, I mean, if folks had learned what happened in Charlottesville and hadn't been so quick to write us off, January 6th might not have been the trap it was for, you know, another cross section of the right.
Yeah. Hey, Ann, any questions for Mr. Kessler here while we have him?
I don't think so.
No? Okay. Now you still write, you're writing for VDare these days, right?
Yeah, I read occasionally.
Okay, cool. I've befriended, I live here in West Virginia, so I get to go to the castle every now and then.
Oh, cool. Yeah, the Brimelows are great. Very courageous people.
Yeah. So, yeah, I didn't really prepare for a Kessler interview. I did kind of shoot you the message though. But thinking back, you know, I have friends that were at the Torchlight rally. And I hear it's quite a polarizing thing. One of my friends thinks it was the best thing of the entire event. Well, it was kind of the only thing that really was allowed to happen. But do you look back and cringe at that, or do you kind of look fondly on the Torchlight March?
Like a lot of things, it's a mixed bag. Like visually, it was quite a spectacle, and I think that's why it's still to this day such a big deal. Why the controversy? Why there are people who are spending billions of dollars to bring us into court is because of how effective that visual was. Of course, you're always going to have the aspect that there was some fighting that occurred towards the end of that. That's going to be a drag on it, and that's going to be the primary criticism people are going to make, and that's always going to be an unfortunate aspect. Some of the unapproved chants I didn't appreciate, but I think "You Will Not Replace Us" is fair. I think that was a good chant, still to this day. So we tried, and I think it's right in line with the history of protests in America. So what are you going to do?
Yeah. I just want to. Anne had to go, but I want to thank her for coming on, and thanks for writing the book
too. Charlottesville Untold is really an excellent book. She did a fantastic job.
Yeah, well, that was good. I just finished it right before the show. Actually, I read it in about 3 days. But it's good stuff. So what's your plans? Are you just dealing with the court cases? Are you officially retired from activism or?
Well, my activism has just been this court case for a long time. You can see that, you know, it's been challenging for a lot of people, and that there's a lot of folks who don't even have attorneys. So being able to get the funding squared away, to work on the legal strategy, that my activism is legal activism at this point. But at some point, I might get back to doing protests again.
Okay. Interesting. How have your views shifted at all? I mean, where would you say your views were? What were your politics like at Charlottesville? And then have they changed at all? Are they?
Yeah, for sure. I think I was more caught up in the alt-right milieu at that time, but I haven't changed that much, but it's more like I've learned how important it is to be myself and not to get caught up in the crowd and have them influence me. So I think there were parts of the way that I behaved during that period where I was trying to be something I wasn't. And so now I'm more comfortable just being who I am, and and doing away with some of that more inflammatory rhetoric that the alt-right was known for in 2017. I don't need that. I think I'm much more comfortable stating the position that I think for there to be a pro-white movement, like a civil rights type movement, you have to get away from focusing on criticism of other races. You want to build yourself up rather than to tear other people down. I think that that's so incredibly important. And I feel like there needs to be a little bit more of a break between what the pro-white movement is going to be and where it has been. I think it needs to separate more distinctly away from these neo-Nazi elements towards something that's more in line with mainstream American values.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's been I guess we could debate, there's a whole debate over, whether or not it's, you have the Michael Joneses of the world who will say white's not a thing. You have certain people who within conservatism who just aren't okay with identity. I guess they think that it's an identity politics trap. And I always kind of point out, well, hey, it doesn't even matter if I identify as white. It's they're identifying me as white and they want me dead, right? And I think a lot of this is getting pretty mainstream now, especially with the opposition to the critical race theory stuff.
It's that's a wild card, is the fact that a lot of the pro-white politics are starting to sprinkle a little bit into the Republican mainstream, and that's completely distinct from the pro-white community that exists online, which I think is not really necessarily springing from the Republican Party, but is from this history in America, which with these very marginalized groups, I would say. I think that there's a lot of people who have good intentions, but being pro-white has been so stigmatized in America for so long, and the only people who've really done it, they're like, just being honest, have been like these KKK groups and these neo-Nazi groups. And so that legacy weighs very heavily, and it's something that I didn't appreciate in 2017. It's like these people are like an albatross, and I think that you have to get away from just like these people who want to talk about Jews all the time or whatever. I think you have to let other people flourish, and work on building up your own people, right, rather than tearing other people down. And that's a hard sell right now. It's a very hard sell.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting interesting dynamic. Obviously I do kind of mainstream politics, not really, but I try and reach, like when I was managing the whiskey campaign, it was kind of my goal to kind of normalize some of the moratorium on immigration and take some of these ideas and normalize them with the pretty blonde, basically. And I think it worked. A lot of the older, the boomer generation was way more receptive than I anticipated. But I mean, there was like a calculated approach as to, how to introduce these, like the racial stuff, and I don't think we went too hard on it. Like we certainly never said pro-white. We never used that language, obviously. But no, I guess. I mean, I juggle with like how explicit should we be, because I mean it is pretty ridiculous that people are more offended by someone being okay with being white even identifying being white than they are with drag queens doing story hour for their kids. Like that seems pretty ridiculous to me. But
yeah, it's working within that mainstream political spectrum is its own set of challenges. For me, I get really tired of it. You know, I guess that's why I've tended to work more with radicals, even people who are more radical than myself, because there's this aspect of me that loves free speech, you know, and loves throwing off the shackles that society is trying to put on you. And I want people to be free. And when I turn on the TV and it's just constantly people trying to program you and make you have these woke values or whatever, you know, and people are kowtowing to that. It's just totally unacceptable to me. And I kind of wish that more people would throw off the shackles and not be enslaved by the comfort that they need in their life.
yeah, I mean that's a hard thing to ask for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean we saw what happened with, you know, Charlottesville. You have people who, you know, have their job and they have a family and they have kids to feed. It's hard to ask them to, you know, to face docs. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Some of the people in Charlottesville, their rhetoric, which is so extreme, though. I mean, it doesn't have to be that extreme. I think you can tone it down quite a bit, and people will still be okay. But you know, when you go out and protest, you need to also think about the people around you. You know, by saying irresponsible things to get attention or whatever, you hurt a lot of people.
Yeah. So, well, I'm out of questions, but is there anything, how can I guess people help? Is there any way that people can help? I know that you're pretty much banned. It's hard nowadays with everybody banned on payment processors and whatnot, but
well, we have a legal fund that's set up through Give, Send, Go, and we're able to get around some of the deplatforming because it is a legal fund, which gives it certain protections. It goes straight to the attorney, James Kalinick of the Kalinick Law Office in Cincinnati, Ohio. And all of your donations are definitely appreciated. This has been an extremely expensive process. It's been ongoing for many years. And now we're in the heart of it, you know, in the heart of the struggle. And that's the most expensive point, where you got to spend like tens of thousands of dollars just to get your attorney there. And then you got to get daily transcripts, which are thousands of dollars. And essentially we're fighting some of the wealthiest and most politically powerful and even skilled attorneys in the entire country. And they have nearly unlimited resources. They've raised millions, tens of millions of dollars. So just to keep up with that, you know, every dollar that people can donate helps. And to do that, go to the website givesendgo.com/UTR. That's for Unite the Right. You can also find a mailing address from my attorney and a Bitcoin address that you can send donations to at jasonkessler.us/donate.
Okay. I also have a Give, Send, Go going because I got in a car accident, and it's in the description. Apparently, getting in a car accident in the state of Virginia is a severe crime, evidently. So I need a lawyer too. But yeah. I hate Virginia, by the way, Jason. No offense, but I'm over here in Best Virginia, and our state troopers are just better than yours. So
our insurance rates have gone through the roof recently. Oh my God. I just got my new insurance policy bill. It sucks.
yeah. Hey, what are your thoughts on Youngkin being elected? I think it has a little. There's some interesting parts about it. You know, the COVID stuff, and then he pushed back on the critical race theory stuff. But
yeah, I've kind of given up on politics. I didn't vote, but I'd say, yeah, if you asked me, I would definitely rather have Youngkin than Terry McAuliffe. I knew that Youngkin had encouraged his employees to vote or to donate to the SPLC, so I wouldn't vote for the guy. But Terry McAuliffe is a scumbag. He's slimy. He's, you know, a lot of these New Yorkers, they come down to New York or come down to Virginia because and then they make Virginia more like New York. Somebody like Terry McAuliffe is just a careerist. You know, it's a dime a dozen people like him in New York, but then he comes down here and throws around his money and his Clinton influence, and you know, it does some phony photo ops with some grills and barbecues and stuff, and acts like he's one of us. He's not. He shouldn't be here. And he really hurt a lot of people with what he did at the Unite the Right rally by having the state police stand down. He's a bad person, and I'm glad that he didn't become governor.
Yeah, he was the governor at the time, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
So
he hurt a lot of people. He's a very bad man.
So he just did one term, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're not able to do consecutive terms as a governor in Virginia. I don't think that there's any limit to the number of times you can become governor. They just can't be consecutive. So he had to let the Klansman Northam become the the governor for a little while.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, maybe I'll ask before, you know, I don't think about it. Do you think that it was all set up from the get-go?
Yeah.
And how high did that go? Did that go all the way up to like the globalist elites, the feds, or was it just the city?
Well, I'd like to know. That's why it's basically you got to take it one step at a time. I'm just a little fish in a big pond, and I have to beat these New York attorneys in this Science v. Kessler case so that I can sue Charlottesville in a case that we have filed, and it's on appeal now. And then maybe we can get discovery and start to figure this out. It certainly was the Charlottesville police chief and the city manager. But yes, I do think it went further than that. I think that Terry McAuliffe had to have been involved. I know that the FBI agents who were studying this or were investigating this thing, they were in the command center when the police chief said, let them fight. I know because I've looked at some of the social media. One of these FBI agents, they were against the Robert E. Lee monument. So it was a fixed game, you know, and they've let the Antifa who attacked the rally go. I don't trust that at all. I don't trust them. And we've all seen too many times the FBI is politically motivated. The way that they set things up against Donald Trump, you know, even in our case, when we were doing voir dire, we had an FBI agent who was being looked at for prospective jury duty, and he was so biased. He said, "I hate Donald Trump, and I can't possibly be impartial in this case because of that." So that tells you everything you need to know about the ideology of the FBI. I mean, who wants to have these people investigating you when they can't even serve on a jury because they're incapable of being impartial because of their political prejudice?
Yeah. Can you guys calm down in the chats? Where are my mods? We got a lot of JEW talk going on. So, and Archie says you're a Fed, Kessler. So,
Isn't everybody?
Yeah. What about now? I did always hear that you were and I never even really questioned it. The whole Occupy Wall Street thing. So you were never involved with that, or?
No, not really. I mean, I was a liberal. I was a Democrat, but being a liberal and a Democrat used to be different than it is now. It wasn't about all this identity politics stuff. I mean, you could be a working class person, and you cared about having a fair shot. You cared about the rich not being too powerful and just crushing you under their boot heel. And I remember when the Occupy thing was going on, I was actually driving a truck at the time. I was a truck driver for a very short period of time in my life. And I remember one time stopping off in Los Angeles and when these Occupy things were going on, and I went and I witnessed the protest that they had there. I didn't take part in it. And my truck at some point like flipped over actually, and I had a slight injury, but I couldn't drive the truck. And so I went back home to Charlottesville. And at that time they were doing like an Occupy Charlottesville protest. And so I still had questions for these people. I wanted to know, well, what are your solutions? What do you want to do to address the power inequalities in society or whatever? So I took a video camera and I started to film them. And these people are in some ways like the far right in that they're very paranoid about being monitored or something. So they didn't like being filmed. And so we came to loggerheads there, and basically they didn't want me coming to that area anymore. So that was the extent of my involvement with them. But then when the Unite the Right thing happened, one of the people who was an occupier then, his name was Luis. Some of these Occupy people went on to become right-wing people, and some of them went on to become like far left Antifa. So this Luis guy became Antifa, and he was interviewed for the local newspaper about me, and that's where the whole Occupy thing comes from. But I was never like a left-wing identity politics person like they were insinuating.
Yeah. I mean, honestly though, I wouldn't have thought much of it. I mean, back then it's actually kind of similar to the national populism movement now. Except they, like you said, it wasn't the same thing being a Democrat back then as it is now.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, fuck Wall Street. The people who have a problem that are like, Kessler was an Occupy Wall Street. No, I wasn't, but still fuck Wall Street. I don't hold any water for that segment of society. Those are like the neocons and Dinesh D'Souza types that are like, oh, don't you love unrestrained capitalism? No, I don't. Who cares?
Yeah, I agree. You did make a comment at the end of that I read at the end of that book about that you feel like the right-wing movement needs to incorporate faith and religion. Can you expound on that a little bit?
I do think that that's an important thing when you look at well, first of all, it's just good for your soul to have some communion with God, and I'm definitely getting more in touch with that during this trial. I'm trying to pray every time that I think about it, just about every day. And if you look at social movements that have really created change, a lot of them are faith-based. I think that when you look at the Black civil rights movement, whether that was Malcolm X with the Muslims, or whether that was Martin Luther King and the churches and stuff like that. Now, whatever people want to say, of course, pro-white people don't like the legacy of Martin Luther King. Look at the tactics, look at the discipline that religion brings. It's very different from this free for all, every man for himself type of thing that you get in secular politics.
Yeah, that's true. I'm going to see if anybody else wants to pop in and see if they have any questions for you. Does anybody in the chat have any questions for Jason here? So we'll see. We'll see. They're still arguing about the certain
They always are.
certain segment of the population that may or may not be overrepresented in the oligarchs. Just kidding. Just kidding. JK. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think anybody else is going to pop on, but let's see. Christendom used to be the word to describe white civilization. That's kind of, what do you think? I have a friend named David Patrick Harry, and he has speculated that a lot of the animus against white people is really just rooted in the fact that we were Christians, that our ancestors were Christians in Europe, and that Europe was kind of the vehicle of spreading Christianity around the world with the Roman Empire and eventually Western Europe. What's your take on that? Do you think there's any credibility to that, or do you think it's just like animus from history?
I don't know. It could be. The issue with Christianity and politics right now is very complicated. I mean, in the area where I live, there's a lot of left-wing churches, and actually the Christian church has become a major breeding ground for far left extremism too, So growing up, of course, Christianity was always a font of, conservative values, family values, and it still is for many people. But it's in some parts of this country, it's getting increasingly hard to find a church where you can just be a normal person who wants to be around other normal people. They put like all the gay propaganda and stuff like right out front, the black supremacy stuff, the Black Lives Matter stuff, and that's not Christianity. That's liberal politics, and it has no.
Hey, I got a church for you, bro. We don't deal with that gay stuff, SJW stuff. All right.
What's your denomination?
I'm an Orthodox Christian. So on this side, there's actually a monastery right near you, down in Spotsylvania, I think it is, St. Demetrios. I don't know how close you are to that.
St. Demetrios. Okay, I'll check that out.
Yeah, it's an Orthodox monastery. It's in a house, actually. It's like a monastery in a big house, but it's worth good monks there. I'm close to the abbot, so. But yeah, you should check it out. I think Orthodoxy is like the last bastion of traditional Christianity that's been relatively unscathed from modernity, so to speak. Of course, there's an element that is attempting, but they're marginalized and not very effective, which is good. So, yeah. But yeah, it's a skeet. But yeah, you should check it out. I'll even go with you one day if you want to go.
Sounds good, man.
I'm about 2.5 hours from there, or 3 hours. So, but anyways, that's all I have. Is there anything else you want to get out about Charlottesville or your court case or final words?
Yeah, if people want to keep track of it, there's a dial-in number that you can listen to. The thing starts every day at 9 a.m. and lasts until 5 p.m. To get the dial-in number, you can just follow me on social media. My Twitter, which is heavily suppressed, so it might be hard for you to find me. Like, you can literally type in my entire handle and it won't pop up. I'm so suppressed. But it's twitter.com/the Mad Dimension. Telegram is really a more exciting platform right now. I'm also on that, and that's at the Mad Dimension. And I'll post the 1-800 number and the access code on those social medias. You can also visit my website, jasonkessler.us, and you'll see all the links to the social media and stuff. And hopefully some of your viewers will join us and listen in and learn about the trial.
All right. Well, I want to thank Anne for being the guest tonight, and then thank you, Jason, for calling in. I think that was great. So, yeah, and best of luck on the trial, man. It's I actually appreciated having the chance to talk to you. So
yeah, it's been fun. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. You have a good night.
Good night.
End broadcast.